She couldn't even find a date. One cousin hissed a little too loudly to be an accident. The other snorted, sipping her champagne like it fueled her cruelty. Of course not. Who'd want her? She peaked in high school. And that was a small hill to begin with. Laughter. Sharp, cold, and deliberate. My heels clicked across the stone tiles of the vineyard's courtyard like tiny stabs of defiance. I kept my chin up, even as heads turned toward me. Not in awe, but in pity, condescension, curiosity. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. My dress clung to me like confidence, sleek and black with a slit up the side. But none of that mattered to them. All they saw was a woman walking in alone to her Aunt Margot's opulent wedding. No ring on my hand. No one beside me. Just me, Eliza Mayfield. 31. Unattached. Unwelcome. Figures, someone muttered behind me. Probably my uncle, the one who still called me pumpkin like I was 5 and clueless. I passed rows of white chairs tied with lilac sashes and headed straight for the reserve section. Every step felt like a negotiation. I could hear Aunt Margot's friends whispering behind manicured hands. I felt the smirk of my father's new wife, only 10 years older than me, burning into my back. And just when I sat down and reached for the chilled glass of water beside my chair, I heard it. Wah-thump, wah-thump, a sound that didn't belong to string quartets or champagne flutes. It grew louder. Heads turned upward. Confused. Irritated. Then someone gasped. Is that a helicopter? Every neck craned toward the sky. And there it was, a matte black private helicopter slicing through the crisp Californian sky. It wasn't just arriving. It was descending, straight toward the empty landing square next to the vineyard's fountain. I didn't move. I just stared straight ahead. The moment the skids hit the ground, the pilot jumped out, and seconds later, he stepped into the open. Custom-tailored navy suit. Broad shoulders. Sunglasses. Hair tousled by the wind, but still controlled. And a jawline that made women lean forward involuntarily. My cousins were frozen mid-sip. One of them still held a cracker near her lips like she'd forgotten what to do with it. And then, my husband walked past every stunned guest and straight toward me. He didn't even pause to acknowledge the gawking. He bent slightly, kissed my cheek, and murmured just loud enough for all those mouths to catch every syllable. Sorry I'm late. The board meeting ran long. Something about your vineyard's expansion plans needing final sign-off. Guess that's your call now, Mrs. Mayfield. Gasps. Literal gasps. My cousin choked on her wine. My father went completely pale. Someone whispered, "Her vineyard?" My husband straightened, his voice now clearly aimed at the crowd. You didn't tell them, love? That the land this whole wedding is hosted on is actually yours now. I gave the smallest smile, and the whispers turned into a collective roar of confusion and panic. The hush over the courtyard didn't last long. Aunt Margot's new husband, Ronald, a retired venture capitalist with a laugh like a lawnmower, tried to chuckle. Well, I suppose we're all learning new things today. But no one joined in, because everyone's eyes were darting between me and the man who just kissed me and announced I owned the land beneath their designer heels. Graham Mayfield, my husband, reached down and gently lifted my hand as if we were alone in the room. His movements were tender, but the effect on the audience was thunderous. I could hear my cousin Ashley muttering, "That's Graham Mayfield. That's Graham freaking Mayfield. He's the guy who built Mayfield Aeronautics," her sister hissed back. "He builds fighter jets." My father finally found his voice. "You're married?" His tone wasn't surprise, it was offense. I looked at him. "I am." "Since when?" my stepmother added, her mascaraed eyes scanning Graham like he was a hoax she hadn't prepared for. "Since 6 months ago." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" someone else snapped. Graham answered instead, slipping his hand into the pocket of his coat. Because your family made it very clear years ago that Eliza's achievements only mattered if they were visible, loud, and approved by them. He pulled out a manila folder and handed it to the event coordinator. What's that? Aunt Margot asked sharply, already on edge. Just a change of registration, he said smoothly. For insurance purposes, we had to update the ownership listing of the estate this morning. The entire property now falls under Eliza's holding company. You're all welcome to continue the celebration. My wife and I certainly wouldn't want to spoil the wedding. My holding company. I saw the words hit like punches. My dad blinked hard. You're not serious. I turned toward him. You disown me for not following your legacy plan, I said, voice even but hard. You told me I was a burden, that investing in me was a waste of family resources. You sneered when I applied to grad school. Do you remember what you said? He didn't answer. Graham supplied it. No man wants a woman with ambition and debt. The silence after that was so thick, you could have drowned in it. I turned my gaze toward my mother, who stood beside my father. She had remained quiet for years, complicit in every slight. I wasn't expecting a defense now. She met my eyes, and then looked away. Typical. Later, when the guests were supposedly enjoying the sunset, I found Ashley and her sister in the vineyard garden whispering about me. She must have tricked him. Probably got pregnant. Maybe she blackmailed him. She always was nosy. I stepped out from behind the stone column, my heels clicking loudly. They spun around. I didn't yell, didn't gloat. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through business school. You were both in Cabo on your parents' dime when I was learning how to split rent between 4 roommates. Ashley opened her mouth, but I cut her off. I graduated top of my class. Built a logistics startup that got acquired last year for $42 million. Graham was an investor. That's how we met. There's no trick, no scandal. Just me working harder than anyone here was willing to believe. They didn't speak. And for the record, I added, stepping closer, I didn't say anything until now because I didn't need to. I let that sit. Then I walked away. I thought the hardest part would be walking into that courtyard. I was wrong. The hardest part came an hour later, after the cake, after the forced toasts, after Aunt Margot clinked her glass and pretended nothing monumental had happened on her big day. Because that's when he cornered me. Trent. My cousin. My father's godson. The one they always compared me to. He found me near the rose garden as I was trying to catch a breath, the air thick with jasmine and quiet rage. He approached with his signature smirk, the same one he wore when he stole my college recommendation letter from the mailbox senior year. I never proved it, but I always knew. Well, he said, swirling a bourbon like it made him worldly. Congrats on the theatrics. Very Netflix finale. I didn't respond. He stepped closer. But we both know what this is, don't we? I looked at him. What? This isn't about success. Or even love. It's revenge. You came back to make us squirm. Classic underdog stunt. You sound threatened, I replied calmly. He chuckled. Please. You're still the girl who cried in the basement after you weren't invited to prom. That stopped me. He knew exactly what he was doing, digging into wounds most of them had forgotten, but I still carried like splinters in my spine. You came back for one day, he sneered. We'll still be here tomorrow. Still connected. Still a family. You'll still be, what? Some rich guy's +1 with no blood ties. I inhaled slowly. Then I smiled. You're right. I'm not blood. That's why I had to be better. His face darkened. I didn't just buy this estate, Trent. I continued. I bought the debt your father secretly owes on the winery. Through a shell corp. Want to guess who the new lien holder is? He blinked. You're bluffing. Ask him, I said, turning my back on him. Ask him why he was whispering in the corner with Graham 15 minutes ago. Because I hadn't come here for recognition. I came here for leverage. And I had all of it now. Inside, the dance floor glowed under fairy lights. But no one was dancing. Conversations had turned hushed, nervous. Word was spreading like fire through dry brush. People were beginning to realize Eliza Mayfield, the quiet one, the no-date girl, was the financial spine of the entire venue they were standing on. And some were smart enough to do the math. If Eliza owned the land, she could end all of this with a single signature. My father found me again, this time without the bravado. Eliza, can we talk? Now you want to talk? I just want to understand.
No.
You want to control. I'm your father. You're the man who told me, when I got into Columbia, that I should apply to dental school instead, so I could marry a stable guy. That was advice. That was fear, I said sharply. Fear that I'd outgrow you. He swallowed. So, what now? I studied him. The lines in his face were deeper than I remembered. His voice wasn't commanding anymore, just small.
Now.
I repeated. Now I decide what kind of legacy I want to build. One that doesn't rely on cruelty to feel powerful. I looked around the courtyard. People were watching, listening. My aunts, the cousins who laughed, the ones who whispered. I'm not here to ruin your day, I said aloud, not just to him now. I came here because I wanted you to see that what you threw away, what you mocked, didn't break. It built. I stepped away from him, walked right onto the stage by the fountain. Then I picked up the microphone. The mic in my hand felt heavier than it should have. Or maybe it was the silence of 100 stares bearing down on me that made it feel like a weapon. I looked out across the courtyard. Gold lights flickered in the overhead vines. Wine glasses clinked faintly in stunned hands. No music played now. Just the humming drone of expectation. I didn't clear my throat. I didn't ask if they could hear me. They were already listening. Some of you laughed when I walked in alone. I began, voice even, but strong. Some of you whispered that I couldn't get a date. That I must be desperate, forgotten, irrelevant. Aunt Margot shifted in her chair. My cousin Ashley stopped chewing her olive. I heard you. Every word. And for a moment it hurt. Not because it's true, but because it reminded me how little this family really knew me. No one moved. My whole life, I've been the girl you underestimate. The girl who didn't follow the plan. The girl who wasn't soft enough, polished enough, rich enough, quiet enough. You called me stubborn when I fought for myself. Difficult when I disagreed. Cold when I stopped showing up. I saw a few eyes drop. My stepmother looked like she wanted to evaporate into her champagne. But let me ask you something, I continued. Why was it so funny that I walked in alone? Why did it matter to you so much? A breeze rippled the sheer curtains tied to the tent poles. No one answered. Because deep down, you wanted me to fail. You needed it. My failure would have made your comfort easier to swallow. My loneliness would have confirmed your belief that women who speak too loudly, dream too big, and walk away from the way things are, end up empty. My voice dropped, almost a whisper now. But I'm not empty. I turned and looked toward Graham, who was standing at the back, arms crossed, his expression unreadable but steady. I am married. To a man who didn't save me, but stood beside me while I saved myself. I built a company from scratch. Sold it. Reinvested. I bought the land we're standing on not to prove a point, but to protect something no one ever did for me, my worth. There it was. I could feel it now, the shift in the air. A few people blinked fast. One, Aunt Sutley, put her wine glass down. I stepped back from the mic, then paused. By the way, I added more softly, I'm not the only one you've silenced in this family. There are others. And I hope they see this as permission to stop letting you define them too. I walked off. And as I passed my father, who was standing rigid and pale, I didn't look at him. But I did say, you should really read the new lease agreement before tomorrow morning. 10 minutes later, I stood by the fountain with Graham. Guests hovered nearby, unsure whether to avoid me or apologize. He leaned in, low enough for only me to hear. You didn't tell me you were going to say all that. I exhaled. Neither did I. He smiled. You okay? No, I whispered. But I'm finally seen. That's better. Then someone screamed. A loud thud followed, a wineglass shattering. We turned. It was Uncle Rob, collapsing in the middle of the dance floor, clutching his chest. Eyes wide. People shouted. Chairs flew back. Someone dialed 911. Chaos erupted. And in the middle of it, Trent stood frozen. His face wasn't shock. It was guilt. Graham moved instinctively to help. But I didn't.
I saw it then.
The way Trent slipped something from his inner pocket and tucked it into his cuff. A bottle cap. A pill bottle cap. And my blood ran cold. Sirens split the quiet vineyard night. Red and white lights pulsed against the marble columns and wine barrels as paramedics rushed toward the dance floor. Uncle Rob was conscious, barely, being hoisted onto a stretcher with his shirt half open and his skin pale as parchment. People were panicking, scattering in every direction. But I didn't move, because I hadn't taken my eyes off Trent. He stood at the edge of the chaos, hands stuffed into his tuxedo pockets, trying too hard to look shocked. But his fingers were twitching, and his jaw was locked tight. Graham returned from helping the EMTs and slid up beside me. They think it was a reaction to his blood pressure meds. But the paramedics said something's off. I kept watching Trent. That's not just high blood pressure, I murmured. Graham frowned. You think he was poisoned? Or dosed with something that messed with his heart meds? Graham studied me. Eliza, you think your cousin tried to kill his own father? No, I said quietly. I think he tried to scare him. Probably over control of the winery. But he got the dosage wrong. He always thought he was the smartest one in the room. But he's never had to live with consequences. Graham exhaled. Want me to step in? I shook my head.
No.
This one's mine. 10 minutes later, I found Trent behind the storage barn, pacing like a caged animal. The wind had picked up, and his hair was a mess. When he saw me, his mouth twitched. You really just had to ruin everything, didn't you? I stepped closer, boots crunching against gravel. You did that all by yourself. He barked a laugh. You have no proof. I don't need proof, I said softly. You already confessed. Not to me, but to Graham. He recorded your chat earlier when you bragged about how old men can't handle a little panic. He froze. I let it sink in. See, I whispered. You weren't subtle. You never are. You thought everyone here was so used to ignoring me, they'd ignore you too. But they don't ignore me anymore. And now they're watching you. He stepped forward, eyes narrowing. You gonna turn me in? That's not who you are. I smiled. You really don't know who I am. And then I reached into my clutch and handed him a folded envelope. What's this? He asked. The transfer papers. Your dad signed over the winery to my holding company last week. Clean, legal, notarized. He was behind on taxes. You were going to inherit nothing. So you tried to scare him into re-signing everything. But you didn't know it was already gone. His hands shook as he opened it. Lies. Call the lawyer. I dare you. He looked up, wild-eyed. You can't do this to me. You did it to yourself. Just like when you leaked my college application essay for a cheap laugh. Or when you told your dad not to invite me to Grandma's last Christmas. Or when you edited me out of Margot's wedding video on purpose. He threw the papers at my feet. You think this makes you powerful? Ruining me? No, I said, stepping back. This doesn't make me powerful. I looked him dead in the eye. But it makes me free. By morning, the headline spread. Heiress silently takes over family vineyard after public wedding shocker. High society, wedding interrupted by medical emergency and ownership bombshell. Guests stunned as mysterious husband arrives in helicopter, declares land belongs to wife. People talked,
Gossiped.
speculated. But I didn't read the comments. I didn't need their validation anymore. Instead, I walked barefoot across the same vineyard I used to be banished from, the morning dew soaking my toes, the sun warming my face. Graham handed me coffee on the balcony. You sure you want to keep it? I nodded.
Yeah, but not for the family.
I'm turning it into something else. A retreat. For women like me. Girls they called too much. He smiled. You're more than enough. I leaned against him, quiet for a long beat. Then I said, you know what the hardest part of last night was? What? I never wanted revenge, I whispered. Not really. I wanted an apology. A single moment where one of them said, "We were wrong." But it never came. Graham wrapped an arm around me. "You didn't need it." I nodded.
No.
I just needed to see myself the way I do now. And to walk away, finally, not as someone they tolerated, but as someone they'll never forget. The startup money should have arrived last week. Check your email. I blinked. The words hit harder than the champagne in my hand. The backyard was glowing with fairy lights and fake smiles. The engagement party for my younger sister, Caitlin, was in full swing. Laughter, clinking glasses, a string quartet playing in the corner. It was everything I'd expected. Except this. I turned to look at Uncle Brad. His face wasn't joking. He'd always had that sharp, investor calm, like he could smell a lie or a bad deal a mile away. I did check. Nothing came, I said, my voice steady, though my heart hammered in my ears. Uncle Brad frowned. That's strange. I transferred it through my office account. Same one we used for the business plan documents. You're sure? I nodded once. If it was there, I'd know. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from and from which city you're watching our videos? And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I saw it then, the first ripple. A woman by the catering table stopped mid-laugh. A cousin paused, drink hovering near his mouth. The atmosphere shifted like someone had cracked glass beneath their heel. My parents, Darlene and Hank, had been mid-conversation with Caitlin's future in-laws. They suddenly turned. Mom's smile dropped. Dad cleared his throat. We should step inside, he muttered quickly, grabbing my mom's arm. No need to make a scene, Uncle Brad said, voice calm but loaded. The air was sharp. I could feel it cut across the space between us all. Caitlin, dressed in a glittering silver dress that caught every flicker of light, stepped closer. What's going on? She asked. What startup? I didn't answer her. My eyes were still locked on our parents as they disappeared through the sliding glass doors like they were escaping a crime scene. Uncle Brad finally turned to me, quiet enough so only I could hear. I sent 200 grand to get your business started. Last week. Darlene said you'd been too distracted to notice. Distracted? I let out a low breath and laughed. But it wasn't joyful.
It was dry.
It was bitter. There's no email, I said again. There's no deposit. There's no transfer confirmation. Just silence. Like always.
He stared at me.
I knew then, this wasn't just a casual miscommunication. This wasn't about a glitch in the system. This was something deeper. What the hell did they do? He muttered. I shook my head slowly. You're the one who just lit the fuse, Uncle Brad. I think we're about to find out. People were whispering. Caitlin looked between us, her smile faltering. Is this about money? I didn't answer her. Because suddenly, every single guest was looking in the same direction, toward the house. And the only thing louder than the quartet now was the silence. The silence didn't last long. Caitlin's fiancé, Logan, a well-polished finance bro from Connecticut with the world's most symmetrical jawline, stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. Do we, need a moment? Maybe we should give you guys privacy? No, Uncle Brad said firmly. I think we should all hear this. My throat was tight, but my spine had never felt straighter. I didn't plan for this confrontation, but I wasn't going to let it slide either. Not this time. Caitlin blinked. Hear what exactly? Uncle Brad looked at me again, giving me a silent nudge to speak. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. That tired, defeated silence I'd been carrying around like an anchor. I dropped it. You want to know why I haven't launched my business yet? I said aloud, stepping forward, so everyone could hear. Because I've been stuck waiting for money that never showed. That was promised. That was sent. I started shifting. Whispers gained momentum. I saw Caitlin's future mother-in-law exchange a sharp glance with her husband. And still, the quartet kept playing like they were soundtracking a slow-motion implosion. Uncle Brad took his phone out. Let's not make assumptions. I'll check the confirmation. He tapped, swiped, tapped again. Then he froze. I have the receipt, he said, holding the phone up. It says it was opened last Thursday, delivered to the same family email address we've always used. My stomach dropped. Family email address? Your mom's. The same one she told me to use because you were restructuring your inbox after that phone hack thing. My jaw clenched. I never said that. I never told her to divert my business communications. That's not my email, I said. That's hers. Uncle Brad looked up at me sharply. And in the audience behind us, the murmur became a wave. That's fraud, someone whispered. Caitlin's face twisted. Wait, are you saying Mom intercepted? I'm saying, I cut in. That 200 grand was never meant to be hidden. That someone I trusted, someone we all trusted, chose to keep it from me. The glass doors opened again. My parents returned. My mother's lipstick looked freshly reapplied. My father's shirt was tucked tighter. They'd tried to compose themselves. But they didn't walk back out. They crawled emotionally, under the weight of everyone's eyes. Is there a problem? Mom asked, her voice crisp, overly sweet. Uncle Brad didn't waste a second. Did you not receive the money I sent for Avery's business? My mom blinked. What money? Uncle Brad raised his phone. Don't lie to me, Darlene. The email was opened. The funds were withdrawn. It came from my business account. For the first time in a long time, I saw fear on her face.
Dad tried to intervene.
Look, this isn't the place. Yes, Uncle Brad said. It is. I stared at them. You told me to be patient. That success takes time. That maybe I wasn't ready yet. And all this time you had the money. My mom's lips trembled. We only wanted what was best for you. I laughed again, bitterly. You mean for Caitlin? Caitlin flinched. What? I didn't know anything about this. I turned toward her. When she needed an apartment in New York, they co-signed. When she wanted to take 6 months off to find herself, they paid. But when I showed them a business plan that took me a year to build, a model backed by a former Fortune 500 consultant, I nodded toward Uncle Brad. They told me I needed to stop dreaming. Because it was risky, Dad shot back, voice rising. You don't build a life on some fantasy app. It wasn't a fantasy, I said quietly. It was mine.
And it was funded.
But you made sure I never saw it. Someone gasped. Logan stepped forward again. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of this family thing, but you're already in the middle, Uncle Brad interrupted. Your fiancé's parents rerouted 200 grand meant for their own daughter, and you're about to join that family. Caitlin's face had turned a shade paler than her dress. She looked at Mom, then Dad, then back at me. I didn't know, she said, voice shaking. Avery, I swear. I believe you, I said honestly. You've always been clueless, Caitlin. And that's not your fault. They raised you in a glass bubble. But I was raised in the same house. I just wasn't given the same glass. A beat passed. 2 guests quietly slipped out the side gate. Uncle Brad folded his arms. I want that money returned. Immediately. Dad's jaw tightened. We don't have it. And just like that, the truth cracked open wide. More whispers. Someone pulled out their phone. Another guest turned to leave. Caitlin staggered back a step, looking like she'd been gut-punched. You spent it, Uncle Brad said slowly, as if confirming his worst fear. You stole from your daughter and spent it. We invested. Mom snapped, defensive now. We thought it'd be safer to hold on to it. She's unstable sometimes. I took a step forward.
No.
I was just inconvenient to your plan. Enough. Dad roared suddenly. This isn't the time. No, I said, eyes locking on him. It's the perfect time. The string quartet finally stopped playing. Maybe they sensed the disaster unraveling in real time. Or maybe someone told them. Either way, the silence left behind was deafening. I turned to the rest of the party. People weren't whispering anymore. They were watching. Some were texting. A few had their cameras out, discreet, but not discreet enough. This isn't a misunderstanding, I said clearly. This is theft. and manipulation, and control dressed up as love. My father's chest rose. You're blowing this out of proportion. I stared at him. You kept $200,000 from me. Uncle Brad's voice cut in, deep and furious. Money I gave specifically for her. Not for your debts or your projects or whatever nonsense you gambled it on. Mom looked down at the grass. We didn't gamble it. Caitlin stepped forward now, her voice brittle. So, what did you do with it? Dad's face twitched. We used it to pay the down payment on your lake house. Caitlin recoiled. What? You were getting engaged, Mom said quickly. We wanted to give you something beautiful. Something permanent. You always said you loved the lake. I didn't ask for that. Caitlin's voice cracked. You stole from Avery to give me a gift I didn't even know I was getting? Someone actually gasped out loud. And it hit me then, this wasn't just about money. It was about worth. About how I was always the one expected to sacrifice. To settle. To smile while being left out. I built something, I said, my voice shaking. From nothing. I worked 2 jobs. I skipped weekends, holidays, birthdays. I did everything myself. I didn't ask for handouts. I asked for help. And you made me feel wrong for doing that. Mom wiped under her eye, as if that would erase it all. You don't understand. No, you don't understand. Uncle Brad snapped. You asked me to believe in her. You said you couldn't support her financially, but that I should. And then you took the money behind her back. Dad rubbed his temples. It was for the family. For Caitlin's future. Then what about mine? I asked. He looked at me. Really looked. And for the first time in my life, I saw regret crack through his arrogance. You were always strong, he muttered. We thought you didn't need it. Strong doesn't mean invincible, I replied. And you don't get to punish me for surviving without you. There was a long pause. No one moved. Even the breeze had stopped. Then Caitlin stepped forward again, but this time, she stood next to me. She reached into her bag, pulled out the small silver key she always carried on her chain, and dropped it into our father's hand. What are you doing? He asked, startled. I don't want the house, she said. Not if it was built on this. Kate. No, she cut in. You raised us to believe in fairness. In doing the right thing. But you didn't do that. And you don't get to hide behind me anymore. My mother looked horrified. My dad looked old. Smaller somehow. And the guests? They were already moving away from them. Uncle Brad stepped forward. If the money isn't returned in 72 hours, I'll involve legal counsel. And you'll be investigated for fraud. My father's voice was hollow. We don't have it anymore. Then sell the house, I said coldly. Just like you sold my future. He looked at me like I'd slapped him. You're not like this, my mother whispered. You used to be kind. I am kind, I said. That's why I didn't do this a long time ago. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my apartment window, watching city lights flicker like they were trying to keep secrets too. Caitlin texted me twice. The second message was a voice note, a quiet apology. She didn't know, and I believed her. But trust wasn't something that came back overnight. Not after this. Uncle Brad called the next morning. He'd already frozen the transfer chain. He was furious, but oddly calm, like a man preparing for war in a tailored suit. You'll get the money back, he promised. One way or another. And when you do, I want to introduce you to someone. I think your idea has more potential than you realize. I stared at my laptop, the mock-up for my app glowing softly. You still believe in it? I asked. I didn't just invest in an idea, Avery. I invested in you. And now I see exactly why. 3 days later, the silence from my parents was louder than ever. No call. No apology. No payment. The lake house was put on the market that morning. Uncle Brad made it clear they had 1 week to return the full amount or he'd pursue criminal charges. I didn't fight him on that. I didn't need to. For once in my life, justice was in motion, and I wasn't the one begging for it. That same evening, I stood in a sleek office downtown, overlooking the city's skyline through floor-to-ceiling glass. Uncle Brad had kept his word. He didn't just return the money. He doubled it. Call it reparation, he said as he handed me the check and a contact card. This guy's a VC out of Austin. Tech forward, social impact focused. He'll want a demo. Be ready. My hands trembled slightly as I took the papers. Not because of nerves, but because for the first time in years, I felt seen. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything yet, he replied. Show them. Build it. The next month was chaos. I barely slept. I worked 16-hour days, surviving on protein bars, iced coffee, and stubborn fire. I refined the user interface, redesigned the onboarding flow, took every bit of feedback from my mentors seriously, even when it hurt. And it did hurt, because I'd spent so long proving my worth to people who never truly saw me that I had to teach myself how to function when someone finally did. Caitlin visited my apartment unannounced one night, holding takeout in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. I still don't know how to fix this, she said, standing in my doorway, but I know you haven't eaten real food in 4 days. So let me try. We sat on my old thrift store couch, eating sesame noodles and garlic chicken. Neither of us said much at first. Then she whispered, "Did you ever feel like they loved me more?" I didn't answer right away. "I don't think it was about love," I said. "It was about control. You were easier to mold." I wasn't. Her eyes welled up. "I would have given the house back in a heartbeat if I'd known." "I know," I cut in softly. "But that's not what hurts. What hurts is that they knew, and they still chose you. Again." She nodded, quietly absorbing it. Then she pulled something from her purse. It was an old photo of us, sitting on the swings in our backyard, me pushing her, both of us laughing. "I don't want this to be our story," she whispered. "I don't either." By the second month, my platform was ready. I named it Climb, a networking and mentorship tool for women breaking into male-dominated industries. Not just another job board or resource list. It was mentorship meets real-time feedback meets peer-led upskilling. And when I presented the live beta to the VC from Austin, he sat back, smiled, and said, "We've been waiting for something like this." Funding closed in 10 days. Meanwhile, my parents' house was now for sale too. The financial unraveling had begun. Quiet, humiliating, irreversible. I hadn't spoken to them since the engagement party. And I didn't plan to. Not until I was ready. Not until they understood that forgiveness wasn't a birthright, it was earned. 2 weeks later, I got an invitation. Caitlin's wedding had been postponed, but she wanted me to attend the new date.
She was planning it herself now.
No help from mom or dad. "I'm building something too," she told me. "Maybe not a tech platform, but a new life. One that doesn't start with lies." She asked me to stand beside her. Not as maid of honor. As her only family. I didn't say yes right away. I needed time. Not to punish her, but to be sure I was healing on my terms, not out of guilt. But the gesture meant something. Launch day came. I stood in a conference room packed with reporters, investors, and future users. When I walked up to the mic, I could feel it all rushing back. The betrayal, the bitterness, the nights alone at my desk with nothing but caffeine and cold ambition. But I smiled. Because I wasn't standing there for them anymore. I was standing there for every girl who'd ever been told she was too much, too risky, too loud, too emotional, or too late. I was standing there for the version of me who almost quit. And when I said, "Welcome to Climb, we rise together," I meant it. 3 weeks after Climb launched, it went viral. Not because of some gimmick. Not because we poured millions into marketing. It spread because it worked. Because for once, there was a space where ambitious women didn't have to tone themselves down to be seen. Where stories like mine weren't exceptions, they were starting points. I was invited to speak on 2 podcasts, then a morning show. Fast Company requested a feature. Forbes called it the quiet disruptor in women's tech. People wanted to know where it came from. I didn't hide the truth. I told them I'd been denied what was mine. That my own family once believed I didn't deserve a future built on my own terms. That betrayal can either break you or forge you into something stronger. The truth didn't hurt anymore. It healed. The day my parents showed up unannounced at my office, I didn't panic. I saw them through the glass wall, standing awkwardly in the reception area, unsure whether to knock or flee. I let them wait 5 minutes before I stepped out. Dad looked smaller. Mom's face was tight with restrained emotion. "We saw the Forbes article," she said first. "You looked very professional." "Thanks," I said flatly. Dad cleared his throat. "We wanted to say we're sorry." "Too late," I replied. "But say it anyway." He looked me in the eye. For once, there was no condescension, just something almost unfamiliar. Humility. "We thought we were helping you by controlling the outcome. But the truth is, we were protecting our own fears. You deserved better." "I know," I said. Mom stepped forward. "We lost a lot, but we know now what it cost you. And we want to rebuild. Slowly. If you'll let us." I looked at them, the people who once believed strength meant silence, and that sacrifice was something daughters gave without question. They weren't villains. Just scared people who'd mistaken control for love. "I'm not ready for dinner or holidays," I said. "But I'm willing to let you earn a seat back in my life." They both nodded. And then they left, not with a hug or a dramatic scene, just a quiet, understanding silence. That was enough. Caitlin's wedding came that summer. Simple. Honest. Nothing performative. She walked down the aisle barefoot, holding Logan's hand, with a small smile that said she'd finally found her own version of freedom. I stood beside her, not as a bridesmaid, as her witness. The sister who forgave, not because it was easy, but because it was worth it. 6 months later, Climb crossed 1 million users. I celebrated quietly. No big party. Just a walk through Central Park, alone with my thoughts, and a cup of hot cider warming my hands. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a message from a girl in Kansas. I used Climb to get a mentor in biotech. "I'm now in a job I never thought I'd land. Thank you for building something that saw me when no one else did." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I smiled. Because I remembered the version of me who sat at my sister's engagement party, holding a champagne glass and swallowing another invisible betrayal. She had no idea what was coming. She had no idea she would become this. Not rich, not famous, but free.